Good afternoon, everybody. It's getting a little late in the day. I see the energy level dropping a little bit, but this is the feel-good topic after the problems and paradoxes of the CIO role and the problems of healthcare. We're here to talk about value creation and innovation and IT as an engine of innovation. We have a really great panel today, so if I can briefly introduce them. So representing the world of creativity and no neckties, we have Rosin from Intuit, who is VP of Innovation. Has done a number of things, including leading their consumer division, including the famous Quicken product, and drove that to new heights. His current focus is on not just the novelty, but impact through novelty, increasing the pipeline and the value for the use of IT as an innovation engine. So welcome, Roy. Then we have representing the world of politics, money, China, and other awe-inspiring worlds. We have Daxi Li, who is founder of the Chinese Association of Science and Business. Very complex and rich and intriguing CV, which I won't attempt to summarize here, but he actually advises numerous politicians, local and national, in China. He runs various panels which are consulted by the Chinese government on issues of economic reform, IT reform, investing and development. So we're pleased to have Daxi here with us. Then we have, from the evil consulting industry, we have Ananth. And Ananth has written extensively on innovation, and we're looking forward to hearing perhaps some comments from Ananth on things like co-evolution and co-innovation and collaboration, especially. Then we have Marco from Codelco, the world's largest copper mining company. Is that right? And I learned over lunch just how information technology intensive the copper mining industry is. And I figured if the copper mining industry is all about information nowadays, then probably we can assume that all businesses are information businesses. And perhaps looking forward to some comments on how let's say traditional or non-IT, traditionally IT-based businesses are now actually extremely information-driven, and how the role that IT is playing in innovation in that context. So, you know, I guess the question behind the question here is the assumption that IT does drive innovation. I think actually there are two views on that, right? We heard Professor Brynjolfsson this morning say that companies can now capitalize on technological advances to pioneer a whole new innovation paradigm. We also heard some statements to the effect that the CIO position in the real world was not yet necessarily positioned to drive innovation, and that perhaps 80% or more of what we spend on IT is on keeping the trains running, legacy system problems, driving functional efficiency. So my first question to the panel is, does IT drive innovation? Can it drive innovation? And if it isn't, you know, what's the bottleneck, right?
So I'll start with a context, which is that, you know, as opposed to the old days where I think companies spent a lot of time and a lot of money pursuing things until ultimately finding they may be going in the wrong direction, the essence of innovation today is to fail fast, to rapidly validate, to figure out if you're going in a good direction or off a cliff quickly before you invest all that time and money. So speed is sort of the essence. And it's not just good for the company, but for the employees themselves. That most entrepreneurial employees, true entrepreneurs, they have an idea. They want to know if they're right or not. They want to test that thought quickly. And so being able to do things fast is essential. And this, the CIO, the IT organization, is a big part of that. When I started in the role, we didn't have an innovation role. And one of the first things I did was looking at what do you need to do to make a company a great place to innovate. In my case, to make Intuit a great place to innovate. And there are a number of things that you just had to get obstacles out of the way. If you wanted to, you had an idea that might be customer-facing, wanted to put a website up, a customer-facing website, it would take you at least 6 to 9 weeks to get servers provisioned, to get into the data center that was locked down for compliance and regulatory reasons. So there were a number of things that the CIO had to do very, very differently, and that the IT organization had to do to enable people to go fast and to learn quickly and experiment quickly. On one end, that could be, hey, I have an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea. I need 10 customers to learn from quickly. So can I tap into our customer database quickly to get people to learn from? That could be the technology they're using to have access to. I want to just experiment with certain mobile payments technology. I need to have access to some of that technology. And it could be just information moving quickly across silos. So we're connecting the pieces of the puzzle, where you have an engineer in India experimenting with mobile technology and a finance person in Dallas who has an idea for how you can actually capture value from mobile payments. Somehow you have to get them together. And so those pieces are IT pieces that actually enable innovation to happen.
Well, Intuit is probably one company where the claim that IT is driving innovation is visibly credible. What is it that connects the potential with the actuality? What is it about the way that IT is managed in Intuit that permits that success?
So obviously we use IT both to create innovation as well as to enable it internally. On the creation side, we're doing more innovation much faster than ever before. And it's the intersection of what technology is making possible with the deep understanding of customer problems. So when we're doing mobile payments and getting businesses paid much faster, as well as slips don't get lost on the way back to the office, that's something that technology is making possible. In the healthcare space, when we're leveraging new payment systems and data feeds from healthcare partners, such that we're actually, in the old days, people would get a bill from their insurance company and they'd put it aside to get the next one and the next one until it finally went into collections. And that's the only point at which they decided that, okay, the insurance company really did what it was supposed to do. And we can actually use technology to say, no, we actually know where you are relative to your deductible, what the real information and what the insurance company did is, and here's a little click now, click to pay now button, and we can get doctors paid 18 days faster, as well as not having to deal with the collections. So we're certainly using technology externally. Internally, the enablement of people, it's basically all about the idea of rapid validation. Everything is geared towards speed. And so it's a mindset of learning quickly at low cost. It is an approach of structuring hypotheses and experiments. And it is an infrastructure, an IT infrastructure, that allows people to take an idea and turn it into an action to validate whether they're going in a good direction.
Thank you, Roy. Daxi, does IT drive innovation, really? And if not, what's the problem?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here to exchange some of my thoughts with you, and especially talking about the innovation, because China now is put innovation in a very important position, and you might not be surprised that CIO in Chinese companies might play a very important role in this part. Because one of the reasons is IT does drive innovation. We have some very good examples in China. And for example, we do some investment in China. So one of our job to do is we promote innovation in China, promote high tech. And in some of our companies, we find out that the IT was quite effectively drive innovation. For example, I am a board director of one Chinese technology company called Ananth. It's a company publicly traded in Hong Kong Stock Exchange, but it is in Nanjing. It's based on Nanjing University. So one of our expansion is we expand to not only just software, but expand to medical device, healthcare. So for example, one of the important joint venture would be with a Japanese group called Itochu. That's a big group, Itochu Group, to do the clinical trial service company. And you may be surprised that the IT system joint developed play a key role to the success of this company. Because you see, to reinforce the quality, you need some very accurate systems, and these systems will make sure the data quality, the procedural quality, and make sure that all the results are reliable. And also this system will make it possible, the collaboration between different parties. So like in our company, besides we have experts in new drug testing, we have very good connections with the national administration. So we can make the clinical trial very efficient. But here, again, IT play a very important role.
Thank you. Perhaps pick up on that question of the role of the IT, the
Right.
CIO in China later, Daxi. Thank
Okay.
you. Ananth, you've written a lot about the difference between the potential of IT to drive innovation and the actuality, and a lot around collaboration. What is the gap between the potential of IT and the actuality? What is that gap, and how do you make IT actually drive not only novelty but results in innovation?
So I think, Martin, the key expectation from the business is that IT as a core technology function within any enterprise is going to actually drive a lot of technology innovation. That broad expectation is broken up into what I would call 3 different buckets. The first is that the CIO is expected to be innovative within the IT function, to keep it running as efficiently as possible, keep it running as bulletproof as you can, doesn't fail, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the innovation expectation that is purely IT and technology, which the other CXOs will not really care how you do it as long as you do it. Right? That's what I would call the run the business expectation. And it's a necessary criterion for you to be credible in the other 2 innovation categories that I'll come to in a minute. If you don't do that part of your job function well, you're not going to be credible as a contributor to innovation in the business. The second part of the innovation is what Daxi also gave an example of, business functions or transformational capabilities in the business. And Roy, you talked about how Intuit expects its products teams to be innovative in the marketplace. The CIO would be expected to be part of that transformational new platform innovation, where the CIO comes up and says, well, I understand enough about our business. Here's how information technology, whether it's mobility, whether it's pure computing, whether it's anything else, can actually help our business become more competitive. So that's the expectation of what I would call platform innovation. It's predicated on the fact that you're doing innovation category 1 extremely well. Because if you're not doing that well, you're not going to be credible in delivering to expectation 2. Expectation 3 is even better, which is a consequence of the fact that we are living in probably the most exciting phase in IT, which is about technology, about ubiquity, about not just the iPad, but everything else, right? And how can the CIO, who is within quotes the IT guy or the IT girl in the leadership team, in tune enough with all the exciting stuff that's going on to contribute something disruptive and breakthrough to that industry. And that 3rd level expectation is predicated on the first 2. That you need to do the basics extremely well. You've got a few transformational platforms under your belt that you've actually delivered value to the business. And now you can say that, well, we can try this exciting new social networks thing, or marketing analytics, or design new exciting products and open new markets. So the CIO is expected to do all these. Most of the CIOs in the room, I would suspect, are good at category 1. Many would be good at category 2. Some would be good at category 3. From a purely TCS perspective, because we are a tech and a services and software company, we took the easy way out. So I'm not the CIO, I'm the CTO. So I'm responsible for categories 2 and 3. Our CIO actually runs category 1. And he's part of our CFO organization. And he has a lot of fun just keeping the systems going and being efficient and all that. So we've done that separation of concerns, if you will. And hopefully it works for us.
Great. We'll come back to a few themes on collaboration in a minute, and thank you. Marco, I heard over lunch how you'd collaborated with the University of Chile to and won prizes for 10-year digitization project at Codelco that had driven results and efficiencies and competitiveness. Could you tell us something about how IT innovation drove results at Codelco?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. In the first place, what happened? I'm sure the IT drives innovation in the company, but the first step is the CIO of the company believe this. If you don't believe the IT drives innovation, it's impossible you leadership the company. Especially in business like our business, the copper mining, the mining in general, and the copper in particular, is a very conservative business. We have the operation for 100 years. The mines of Codelco has 100 years of operation. And in this time, the mines create culture, create procedures, and the people resist the change. But the technology has the capacity for create a new reality. For example, today, the technology has the possibility, we think in the remote operation. We think in mines without drivers in the trucks, with autonomous trucks. We started 6 months ago in Chile with the first mine with trucks without drivers, the first mine in the world. And in this, if you believe the IT change the reality, you create the vision for the company. In this vision, we have, in my company, we have the vision Digital Codelco. And in Digital Codelco, we work a lot with the universities. The first step is relate with the university in the country. Relate with the university and create a specialized center for generate new technology, for generate new application of technology. In Chile, we don't develop technology, but we apply the technology, and we create with the University of Chile, create the center for applied technology to the mine. I'm working, for example, with NTT of Japan for take the photonics network from Japan and apply the photonic technology inside the mines, inside the tunnels, for example. We have today a very strong alliance with the University of Chile in Santiago. We have people from the university working inside the mines, and we have people from the mine working inside the university.
Thank you, Marco. So let's maybe step down the value chain of innovation together. So presumably innovation begins with some need or some idea. And I heard some comments about social networking technologies, collaboration technologies to pick up external and internal ideas more effectively. There's also the paradox of information overload. I mean, if we know more all the time and it's changing all the time, and we can communicate with more people, and the clock speed of the company is running faster in general, people are busier in general. I mean, how do we detect the right signals in the first place? How do we make the collaboration also correlate with pattern recognition? Ananth?
I was smiling because we've gone through the gamut of that same information overload phenomenon. One of the downsides, or maybe the sort of hidden upsides of being CTO of a 160,000 people company is that I'm the lightning rod for all the wacky ideas in the world. And in our old system, which was called PIP, you would send in the idea or the suggestion, and I had to personally go through 30,000 ideas a year. I mean, I didn't do so personally. I had a staff of people to actually do that, but it was such a waste of time. 4 years ago, we switched to a more social networky idea platform. And now everybody pops the ideas in. We get more ideas, but they get rated, voted, debated by the community. And I look at the wisdom of crowds as my short list of 5 or 10 ideas. So
if I could jump in on that, Anne. So we have the wisdom of crowds and the fashionableness of open source arrangements and so on. We've also just been through a major financial meltdown, which presumably is the stupidity of crowds. How do we know when to use these open source, social, ratings type of solutions, and when to rely on good old-fashioned individual ingenuity or deductive analysis? What sort of technologies are right for what sort of problems?
So again, if I can jump in, it certainly works for the ideation. It works for find the expert. So you pop in a question, the Yahoo Answers style of things. So you pop in a question, somebody answers it, and if you keep answering questions, you build a reputation and so on. So it works for those. Very limited areas, it works for prediction markets for specific events. Beyond that, I would tend to agree that it becomes a little more hairy.
Yeah, I think it is the intersection between what the tool can do and sort of what your operating mechanisms and methodologies need to do. So when I began to structure innovation programs at Intuit, it was very interesting. Google has, I think, a very good way of saying it, that when you look at innovation successes, innovation is fundamentally a collaborative exercise, and collaboration requires visibility. And visibility is, it's how do you find information, but the right information, and so you don't get into that information overload world. We went looking for a tool that enabled that very Google-like approach, and actually couldn't find it. There were idea collection tools. There were things that presented themselves as collaboration tools, but that really they remained silos of information. Information came in and never went out. We actually built a tool called Brainstorm, Intuit Brainstorm. It's something we're commercializing now, which did take a very specific approach at this problem, which was how do you connect ideas to the people who can best help them and move them forward? How do you actually understand that element of the idea and connect it both to other ideas to get to critical mass, to the people, whether through perspective or expertise or, in some cases, organizational placement? That's something that the idea turns into an action.
And when you'd say that had driven the results that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, it was a big part of driving the results, but I'm going to get to the other part Ananth was talking about as well. So in terms of the information overload, it's built around this notion of subscriptions. If anyone goes and swims in the data, they're going to be overwhelmed. And so one of the first things you realize is the information, first of all, it has to come to you based on what your interests are. So the ability to subscribe to a topic or an idea or a business area or even a person, things that are of particular interest to you. So that's a filter. And you get it coming to you in your inbox, where your eyes tend to be. As well as that same concept going throughout the technology where instead of having to search, related things are coming toward you. So you kind of trip over them and discover them in a more normal workflow. But the reality of what are the best ideas, I think there's a signal which is very different to me than an answer. And a signal is, when we see a lot of energy and a lot of people circling a topic. Electronic receipts were an example of this not long ago. Some people loved electronic receipts because it saved paper and was environmental. Some people loved it because it saved paper and it was cost saving. Some people loved it because if you sent an electronic receipt, you had their contact information and you automatically had a CRM solution. There's a lot of different people circling and energetically contributing their thoughts and expertise to this topic. That didn't mean it was a great idea. It did mean it was something to go investigate. And the way that, still the deep immersion, the ethnography, the more cultural anthropology, the ability to get in and understand a problem in its context, why it happens, why existing solutions fail, those methods are still going to be a better answer towards, is this really a good idea or not? But it's a great signal to say, hey, pay attention to this area.
So assuming that these collaborative technologies surface more ideas more productively, but as you said, they're not necessarily good ideas, they're signals. Presumably, the next step in the chain is some sort of experimentation. Now, all companies do some form of experimentation, of course, in product development, but I think what we're talking about here is business model experiments or business process experiments. If we think about competitiveness applying to the notion of experimentation and IT as a platform for that, what does it mean to be competitive in experimentation? Ro, would you like to take that?
Sure, I can start. I think so. This does come down. There's been a lot of people I think who have been very articulate. There's a guy named Reeves who talks about lean startup as an approach. And it's lean development, but it's applied to business creation. So it is instead of as Clay Christensen jokes, don't be an Apple Newton, don't spend years and $350 million going in the wrong direction. So how do you identify what the big assumption is that success depends on, and construct a very rapid experiment to validate whether this is a good direction or not? And there are certainly there are technology techniques. So you hear people doing dry testing or vapor testing. People are surprised when they go to an e-commerce site and something is out of stock to hear that in many cases that thing never existed. There was a concept, and somebody wanted to see if you ever clicked that you're interested in buying it. Or they would buy Google AdWords for a product that doesn't exist just to see if there's demand. Very rapidly before you invest a lot of time and money to see if there's demand. And so there's certainly those types of techniques. But I think in the IT world, there's a lot of things. When I talked about the old way of getting into the data center, instead of 6 to 9 weeks now, because of our CIO division, it's now 10 minutes. 10 minutes, it's self-provisioning, it's automated, you can get the stack that you need. This is, a good entrepreneur isn't going to wait 6 weeks. So that's a part of being able to do a rapid experiment without a lot of time, without a lot of cost. But also, I think about, for example, one of our experiments was in TurboTax. A team said, we have a lot of people who don't have traditional bank accounts. And they have no way of getting a refund easily. So we processed $33 billion of refunds last year. And we said about a quarter of those, a quarter of the people don't have bank accounts. And we knew there was an opportunity. There's this conceptual idea of loading a debit card, of sending the refund directly to a debit card. And what was fascinating to me is, technology came in a bunch of ways. First of all, this is, TurboTax is a product. The IT figured out how to put in external web pages that looked like they were part of the product so they could very rapidly A/B test different approaches. They could swap in and out different ideas very rapidly because it was just web pages they could change. And that tuned it to make it work. But also, the technology too, we loaded 500,000 debit cards, 500,000 debit cards in a very short period of time. That's something that technology made possible to even deliver on that kind of solution. So, technology allowed sort of that rapid experimentation on the A/B side. It allowed it in terms of the spinning up of the technology required to do the work, but it also allowed it in terms of what was possible in creating the solution.
Okay. Marco, I had a question for you on maybe the next step, which is the scale-up of the successful experiments. I believe you have some very large-scale applications of IT and in program management and so on. How do you take the good ideas, the good IT ideas, and scale them very rapidly through the organization, through the obstacles of organizational behavior and budgets and misunderstandings and education and so on?
Okay. In the first place, in the company, you need good ideas, and not all of the good ideas are from inside of the company. We create a community for innovation in the copper mining. In this community, invited to the people from Codelco inside of the company, invite the people from providers, invite to the university to participate with ideas, and invite to the other mining companies like BHP, Anglo American. In general, in the copper market, we don't have a strong competition. All of copper you provide is you have a possibility of sell, and this is no problem. This situation facilitates the cooperation. When you have the community for ideas, we define inside the company, define a special budget for pilot. We have the capacity for take a good idea and very, very speed, take this idea and generate a pilot and escalate to the company. We have a special careful with the provide the budget for the pilot, for the capacity for take good idea and escalate in the pilot and to the company.
What is critical to speed and accuracy in going from pilot to full-scale application?
How is the time?
What is really critical in terms of taking those pilots and pushing them through to full-scale application?
inside the company, we evaluate with the user committee, evaluate the value. We have the conversation for evaluate the value, the real value for the idea in the pilot. In the pilot, try the measure the real value for the idea for the company, and evaluating the special user committee, evaluate the real capacity of this idea for generate revenue for the company.
So you get advanced buy-in by having user panels involved in the pilots.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
And I think the metrics change. Go ahead, Daxi.
Daxi.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say a few words about the
please.
experimentation. I think the experimentation is one of the important ways that IT can drive innovation. And it's not just expectation for in business way, but also some real invention or whatever, some new idea, some innovation thing. For example, we invested one high-tech company. It's the high-altitude wind power technology company that's supposedly just you see, in high altitude, like 10,000 meters high, the wind power's density is about 100 times higher than the wind energy in the surface. So that one might solve the problem of the energy need, because just 1% of the energy can be sufficient for the whole universe, the operations. But how to do it? The control is a very important problem. But so this company has some very good idea how to create a very smart control system to do it. But in order to really do it, you need to do some experiments. But it's not possible for a startup company to spend like tens of millions of dollars to do the real experiment. So what they can do is, first of all, they use, so that the CIO of this company plays some important roles. They set up some simulation things, so like in fluid dynamics and so on. So they did a lot of experimentations in terms of simulate the situation up there. So of course that cannot replace the real testing, but they reduced a lot cost for that. Mm-hmm. So then they can find out some best way to implement it. So it's make the innovation possible, right? Yeah. So I just say experimentation in that way is also important.
I mean, so on that theme of the value proposition of the IT function being superior or competitive economics of experimentation through simulation and so on.
Right.
I'm wondering how we measure that. How do we measure? How do we think the economics of experimentation should be measured? So that's your job, I think, right? How do you think about that problem?
Sure, and it does allow me to build on actually a couple of the comments that were made. Just a few things I wanted to say. I mean, so much of this is essentially a change management function. I mean, what you're doing as, it doesn't matter that you could be a CXO, as you said, any chief leader in the company, and it's a change management issue. And what you're doing is you're saying, in the old world, if you believe the story about rapid validation, about fast learning and fast failure, you realize that the old metrics of how big did you get, how fast did you get to be 10 million in a year, 100 million, a billion, those are very bad. Because basically that pushes you towards scaling very quickly, potentially before you know if you're going in the right direction. So then you start to say, well, what are the right metrics? How do you think about metrics that are the ways that you'd know to move out of a pilot into a full-scale implementation? And generally what I think you see are metrics that are a lot more closely related to the hypothesis you're testing. And it's the simplest way I think that a lot of people look at it is saying, well, why are we doing this to begin with? What is the outcome that we expect? Do we expect this person to save 15% of their time? Do we expect 100 new customers to walk in the door? Do we expect a certain conversion rate of power from wind to actual electricity? What is it we expect? And then can we actually achieve that outcome on a small scale? And so you start to look at metrics like actual, did you achieve, whether it was 5, 10, or 20 people, regardless of the size, did you achieve the outcome? That would be a very different type of metric that you start to look at.
So I can hear, Roy, that you're saying it's important to have project-specific outcomes. Do you have any umbrella metrics of innovation productivity at Intuit?
We certainly have that as well, and those, I think, change over time. I mean, I think if you're taking a large enterprise and you're going from a more traditional way of operating to a newer way of operating, what you're looking at is this spectrum that I find, and I'm curious what my colleagues here believe, but I see it starts in participation and engagement. So are you engaging the people that you're trying to engage, and is it working for them? You start to see things like conversion from idea to some kind of implementation. So you actually are measuring how many of these ideas went anywhere, how many of them turned into something. You start to measure velocity. Time to market is critically important. So you start to say, how long did it take from the inception of the idea to the implementation? And this does get right back to change management, because the essence of change management is what do you measure and what do you make visible and what do you celebrate? And if you're only celebrating things that got really big, you're going to dramatically warp your innovation program. If you start to celebrate people who did rapid experiments and maybe invalidated something, if somebody who turned an idea into something that you can celebrate, got it to market in 3 weeks and 3 months, that changes the nature of the culture, and it changes the nature of the company. And it's basically because you've been measuring something different, so you can celebrate something different.
But I follow a little more nuanced metrics approach. I mean, TCS measures everything to the depth. We've got a very strong metrics culture. So I leverage some of that. So the nuances come in the types of innovation, to go back to my original thesis. So if you are coming up with innovations and ideas which are incremental, then those measures are different. So they tend to be ROI, you mentioned velocity, speed, productivity, efficiency, cost savings, and so on. So for this amount of input effort, what were the outcomes that you've measured and produced in 3 months, 6 months? These tend to be projects which can be done by the operating teams. You need to have a culture which encourages this sort of, I call it creative dissatisfaction. Be dissatisfied with what you're delivering and therefore look for the improvement. And that's the predominant culture that you need to drive across the whole company. I mean, this is not a good time to talk about Toyota maybe, but that's the kind of quality culture that they have built over the last several decades.
The type 2 and type 3 innovation you talked about can, on a case-by-case basis, be very expensive, right? How do you know you're getting value for money?
So for the platforms, which are typically transformational, new capability to the business, new functions that you might deliver into the market within your existing market umbrella, those would need what I would call program-style measures. So there would be a very rigorous process of picking the few experiments that you will choose to scale. And once you have done that, those programs would be, to Roy's point, be managed just like a change project. We would have traditional metrics on how long are they taking, are they on track, are they validating the assumptions they started with, and are they delivering. The third category, which is the truly disruptive things, the new market things, whether it's wind power, whether it's new capability, and so on, there I actually measure the failure rate. How many ideas am I trying out? How many are failing? And I look for a threshold failure rate. I mean, I should be trying and failing very often because there's no guarantee that I'll hit a home run anytime soon. So the metric there is number and quality of ideas which do go past certain gates in the experimentation cycle. And there's a sort of measure on the total cap of money that I'll spend on that category, because I don't want to be spending billions of dollars on experiments and return nothing. So I'd say I'm going to spend X million dollars on category 3. And within that, I'd like to do as many experiments and fail as many times as I can, because that's hopefully increasing my success.
That sounds convincing, Ananth, but of course, probably one's competitors are thinking like that too. And I'm wondering if we're not to fall into the trap of sort of infrastructural IT, where it simply becomes a cost of doing business, but the technology is very widespread. If we add another layer onto your explanation, which is competitiveness, relative throughput or failure rate, how do we begin to think about the competitiveness of innovation in a way that we can measure?
So the way I look at it is that competitiveness is driven differently in different parts of the innovation landscape. So competitiveness in category 1, if you will, is going to be almost always driven by traditional cost, time, quality kind of metrics. Competitiveness in category 2 is going to be driven by capability that you deliver hopefully quickly enough into the market. Competitiveness in category 3 is, as I said, dependent on the quality of ideas that you're able to evaluate and generate. And there, I think it's going to be the quality of your ecosystem. To Marco's point, how quickly or how effectively can you reach out to your ecosystem around you to tap into the best ideas? Photonics in copper mines is a brilliant idea. I don't know whether it finally worked, but that would give them competitive advantage in their industry because it's really high tech, and they could not have done it alone. They had to depend on the universities and other partners to do it. So in the third one, the competitiveness will come from your quality of your ecosystem.
Well, let's ask Marco, because I know Codelco has at least an outside-in reputation of being a company that measures everything. How do you measure the return on your IT and innovation investments?
It's not easy. The metrics is not easy. It's a big problem, especially for IT. But in our experience, when you have projects in administrative areas of the company, it's very difficult, put metrics in the table. But when you have projects in the production area, in the core process of the company, it's more easy. It's more easy. In general, this type of project is very related with the production. And the mining people understand very good the production concept. But in this moment, for example, we try to have the more focus in productions with IT. We are working a lot for incorporate IT in the production, not in the administrative area. In the administrative area, we use ERP, but we are working a lot in the production. But only one reflection. The innovation is very related with the risk. It's impossible to have innovation when you don't have risk. Yeah. And the risk is complicated with the metrics. Yeah.
I mean, I remember when we went and started the studies of whether it's the best venture capitalists or what Lafley was doing with Procter & Gamble and the tremendous turnaround in 2000, and companies who've really done a tremendous job are Cisco since 2006, which has done a phenomenal job using some of the things we've actually been talking about. I remember we sat there and said, well, what can you expect? We talk about risk and success rates. And it's fuzzy. It's very hard to measure because, is a rapid experiment that fails, is that a failure, or is that just a hypothesis that was invalidated? So the definition of a failure changes in a good way. It's no longer, if you don't lose years and millions of dollars, it's not even that really a failure. It's sort of a learning. But the best batting averages were in that 400, batting 400, batting 500. The best of the best, we're still failing half the time.
Yeah.
We were probably down batting about 200, 250, so we knew we had room for improvement back then. But there was that sort of batting 500 of the companies who were just hitting the ball out of the park.
So one final question for the panel before we open it up. So in terms of risk and failure, this touches and loops back to some of the comments about culture. So assuming we've got everything else right, what is it about a culture that needs to be in place in order that IT-driven innovations actually propagate and are embraced productively? Have any thoughts on that, Daxi?
Okay. I think it's,
And in particular, I was intrigued by your comment that the role of the CIO in Chinese companies may be quite different.
Right. It's, because when talking about the measurement, I think really very tough. It's very difficult to do it, especially in China.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of innovation, China is one thing to quite beyond it's the corporate culture, because in order to do innovation, you need to have a culture you allow to take risk, you allow to fail. But the most right now China. Many CIO actually they sometimes just like IT manager, but so what they do is what their focus in like cost cutting or make the process more efficient. But if, in order to do innovation, they really need to face these tough challenges is just to change the corporate culture and let them encourage taking risk and encourage the dare to make mistake. That's the very important one. So I think it's in order to be successful in the whole country or in your group of companies, to establish this culture, it's one of the big challenge for China's CIO.
Reckon you thought about this a little bit?
Yeah, I was going to say that so we talk a lot about risk, and there is risk inherent in what we do, but it's really how do you make that intelligent risk is really a lot of what it's about. And I think culturally, when I work with general managers or business leaders, there are a couple of these culture questions that you have to get through first before any of the other stuff matters. You do ask, so there's a culture of customer immersion. Are you being guided by, a real understanding of important problems that are unsolved and why those problems happen? How do you spend your time? I've worked with executives who, talk innovation, 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 and you look at their calendar or you listen to their all-hands employee meetings, and they're only talking about the big businesses that are bringing in, $1 billion. They're not spending time with the little teams who are not material yet. They're not, talking and celebrating those things. So what are you celebrating? And of course, as I said before, what are you measuring? Are you just measuring revenue? Shareholder type of metrics, or are you measuring those leading indicators and those interim successes and celebrating the heck out of those little things, where you're going to parade this guy on stage not because he brought in $10 million, but because he did something brilliantly fast and brilliantly fascinating and did some great learning from that, and you're going to celebrate what he did and how he did it, even though it's not material to the company. It's a very big culture change. Things like Brainstorm, the tool that I was talking about that we created, that's a big change in the culture as well. Most of the successes that have come out of that, we've turned about 122 ideas into some kind of outcome. This culture is that people are talking to each other. They didn't even know each other before. So it's across all the normal silos of functional business unit, geographic location. And the culture of putting yourself out there and getting feedback and getting a conversation and dialogue going around, here's this perspective, here's a different perspective. Hey, I never even thought to bring in legal or finance at this point, this far upstream, this far back where they can actually shape how I do it. And this is particularly relevant in mobile. A lot of people think mobile is just go build an application. It's like, you don't go just build an application. You actually need to understand the ecosystem, which means you have to be pulling entirely different people at the very front end of the process, which is culture change.
Yes.
It's how you connect people in a different way at a different time.
Thank you. Okay, perhaps we can open it up for questions now. If anybody that wants to ask a question would come up, please, to one of these two microphones and ask a question.
Hi, I'm probably going to be bashed for asking this question in this panel, because one of the things I feel is maybe IT is not part of innovation. I mean, I'm looking at this panel, and with the exception of Marco, I'm guessing everybody else does not even report into IT. And I'm wondering, particularly Ananth, you said, within TCS, you've got a CIO and a CTO, and you do, and it was very profound to me the way you listed the 3 buckets. And 2 and 3 is what innovation is about. And you guys at TCS took 2 and 3 and created an organization under you. I'm wondering if that's the right way to do it, rather than saying IT is...
So you're not, if I get your question right, you're not saying that IT as a technology doesn't drive innovation, you're saying the IT function doesn't drive innovation.
IT as a department or function.
Does anyone want to...
Because that's how I understood this discussion to be.
Comment on that challenge?
I have strong...
Since I was named, I go first. No, but I don't think it's prescriptive. I mean, it certainly works for us. Yeah. And as a technology company, it's probably appropriate. I do talk to a lot of my peers in the technology world, and the role of the CTO in a tech company is now becoming closer to what I do, which is new products, new services, new offerings, and not as a subsidiary function doing architecture under a CIO. So to that extent, the tech world, it seems appropriate. But as I see the TCS customer base, and I deal with literally hundreds of CIO friends in our customer base, most of them still would carry the responsibility of being the IT innovator in that bank, insurance, telephone company, transportation company, whatever, mining company, and so on. So in a board meeting, when somebody is talking technology, everybody turns to the CIO and says, what do you think? So you can't really escape that responsibility. And therefore, because you're the information technology person in the leadership team, you have to perform that role as a CIO in a non-tech company environment. Now, you might create an innovation function in your team, in the IT team, to look at innovation. Like, for example, Roy is probably doing that function in Intuit, and therefore you've sort of created a sub-organization within IT which is responsible for innovation, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think you can duck it completely by saying, name a CTO and hand the whole baby bathwater.
Well, I think we have one very powerful counterexample here.
Exactly.
Because we have a CIO, where I stands for information technology, not innovation. Roy is a chief innovating officer, but the IT function drives innovation at Codelco, right?
Yes, today.
So how do you achieve that where many companies fail?
Yes. But in the mining, for example, it's very important that automation. Mm-hmm. In the traditional areas, automation is not part of IT. In Codelco, it's part of IT. Mm-hmm. Like we have automation, we have more possibility for create innovation for plant, for example. But I think I think this type of thing is related with the persons to the finance. When you have C-level person, each C-level is a different person, and it's not related with you are CTO or you are CIO. It's more related with the culture of the company and the person.
I was going to answer just by building off of what Ananth was saying, because the frameworks that you laid out are probably more profound than we have time to really get into in depth here. But both the different types of innovation as well as the different roles of CIO, I just want to take a minute to speak a little bit more about that. Which is, so first of all, I realized we got to the end of the panel, we didn't really define innovation, and which I think is very, very important. Innovation as opposed to invention, innovation for most people means the successful commercialization or the successful value capture and creation around new ideas, not just new ideas. And when you think about it, and you were saying this beautifully, there's very different types. There is product innovation, there's business model innovation, there's process innovation, there's commercial innovation, which Procter & Gamble has been tremendously successful with. And as you think about these different types of innovation, the role of IT changes dramatically. Yep. On business model innovation, if any of you are listening to the Enterprise 3.0 session, a lot of it, at least in the technology world, it's, some people jokingly call it freemium, where there's too much free and not enough meum. But it's sort of this beyond user pay model. Well, beyond user pay is the ability to take your data assets and do something with them. That's all about enablement of a new business model. In process innovation, you talk about automation. Some of the things that enabled some of the great breakthroughs, were very much IT driven. But when I look at that enablement, if I get back to your other framework of the different roles, the very foundational one of doing your job, also depends how you define your job. Like, innovation requires slack. I mean, people think slack is a bad word, but slack is essential for innovation. Correct. And the CIO has a huge role in helping create slack. I know I'm not that deep in some of our enterprise businesses. We have one called QuickBase. I was just reading a customer story. Procter & Gamble is one of our customers, and this particular application of QuickBase saved them per person 20 days of meetings per year, per person. That's a lot of slack. That's a lot of time you freed up to do more value-added work. I think that productivity layer makes a big, big difference in how you contribute.
Maybe get a couple of other questions. Thank you for your question. Yes?
Thank you. I really appreciate the breadth and the scope that you've all covered. One of the things that I'm not hearing that I'd like to ask you about is where you place or how you fit into your organizations the establishment of that core capability. I think it was Mr. Krishnan, right, who described the 3 steps. Well, it seems from my perspective that when you look at the core of where the third one comes from, how do you develop that? It comes from creating a rich and ongoing capability. So if you wouldn't mind, please, sharing your thoughts on how to create that core knowledge, that core capability, because otherwise we're stuck sort of in a unconscious, model where we don't know what's possible. And that is very damaging to an enterprise, an organization. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts, please.
So if you don't have the category 3 capability, the truly radical stuff, the easiest way to jumpstart it is to set up an innovation ecosystem. I call it the co-innovation network. Even though we as a company had a very rich tradition of research and so on and so forth, we said that we must open up the culture of the company to look outside. Marco talked about going to Japan and the universities and so on. That's exactly what we did as well. We talked to the startup ecosystem, we talked to our customers, we talked to our partners and say, we need to learn from you on what you're doing, how you're doing it, what are your challenges and problems, who are the interesting startups who are doing stuff. The MIT, we partner with them as well and so on and so forth. So the easiest way to jumpstart that external, that disruptive culture is to go outwards. I mean, that's at least
I would agree with that,
it.
Ananth. I mean, our research would say that there are 4 values that you find in all cultures with high second-order learning capabilities, learning how to learn new things. One of them is external orientation, indeed, which you can actually measure pretty easily. Mm-hmm. What do people talk about in meetings, internal stuff or external stuff? Tolerance of creative dissent, mm-hmm. Argument, alternatives, tolerance of failure, and interestingly, slack. Yeah. 100% efficiency means no failure, means no learning, essentially. So.
Yeah. No ability to step back and reimagine your world.
Yes.
But I think that it's beyond an external focus. I think it is. It's a little more than that too, which is it's an ability to walk in their shoes, which is more than just to observe. The more you immerse yourself in that context, I think the better off you do. So each of the ones Martin talked about, it's actionable. You can go adopt customers. You can actually take on the roles of your customers and have to do their work. When you do your customers' work, your customers may be your employees if you're a CIO, right? But if you take on their roles and do their work, I mean, you will feel their pain in a way that is far greater than if you interview them. Focus groups are fairly worthless, frankly, right? And so I think immersing yourself in their culture, whether it's an internal customer like an employee or an external customer, is a very, very big difference. The second point you made, I was trying to say before Slack, there's another one that you're talking about.
Creative dissent.
So creative dissent. There are very rigorous processes. If you're familiar with design thinking or IDEO and design for delight type of approaches, that and actually there's some famous Chinese companies who do this extremely well, where they call it 7 to get 1. One of the leading engineering firms in the world in China, they have a 7 to get 1, which means when there's a problem, you can't just come up with a solution. You have to come up with 7 solutions. You must come up with more than one. And that's remarkable what it does. Even getting to number 2 is remarkable, because what it does is it shakes you off of your first idea. Yeah. Your first idea, people have this problem solution thinking, right? I see a kid crying, I say stop crying. It's not a very good solution. But you have to kind of go beyond that sort of first reaction, and sort of there are very structural ways to get to that dissent of, I'm going to come up with 3 other possible ways of solving it and see what do I learn from each one of them.
Let's see if we can get in maybe a couple more questions.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Mac Joshi. I'm finishing my MBA at Kellogg. And some of the insights you guys are sharing are very helpful and help us gel the concepts. Couple of things that I would like to add to these acronyms that were talked about in the CIO, CEO, CTO interchangeability. One of the words the terms I've heard is Chief Relationships Officer, which is being the CIO, one of the primary responsibilities is maintaining relationships. So CIO also stands for Chief Integration Officer and Relationships Officer and those kinds of things. The other question, the real question I came up with was disruptive technologies. We've come to learn that the disruptive technologies typically come from customers who are your non-conventional customers, and really the paying customers are not appreciative of you investing any money or efforts into disruptive technologies. As CTOs and CIOs of leading organizations, how do you manage this disparate set of customers and their demands? Because you obviously need to invest in the disruptive technologies, which are not going to give you immediate benefits, but are sort of long-term benefits. So how do you manage
So Roy, is the
balance?
customer from hell actually the customer from heaven?
Absolutely. I mean, so So disruption, just to be clear, I think, not to target the way you said it. So, disruption is not sort of disruptive technology is a very tricky thing to say. I mean, disruption is a set of circumstances, right? And it is an ability to look for these set of circumstances. You're looking for where are people outsourcing things due to a lack of skill or expertise? Where are people going to a inconvenient centralized location to get work done? Where are people making a trade-off that's not their preferred trade-off, price performance type of trade-offs. So technology is not necessarily the best way to think about disruption theory. But going to the people who are overserved and finding those people is a very interesting way. Going to lead users is a very interesting way.
I hate to cut it off, but Jerry will kill me if we don't end on time. But perhaps we can take some of the other questions when we disband.
We have time for one more question, and then we...
Please.
Hopefully this will be a great question to end on. My name's Eric Sebesta with Cloud Technology Partners. We help CIOs transform their enterprises using cloud solutions. So the question, and I'd love to have you ask a series of questions to the audience, and sort of and maybe by show of hands, a series of questions, and the questions would go something like, what are the key things preventing you from doing innovation in your organization? Is it funding? Is it people? Is it such? Just to get a show of hands, to get a sense for really what are the barriers to the CIO. Now, you guys seem to be able to get funding pretty easily.
That sounds like a good innovation to end on. So let me improvise a straw poll. So what are the key bottlenecks to making IT deliver on innovation in your organization? So is it money? Oh, lots of rich people in the room. Is it culture? Oh, lots of alienated people in the room. Is it organization? Yeah. What else could it be?
Information flow?
All of the above?
Insight?
Is it the four? Let's go through the four things I talked about. Is it external orientation?
In other words, lack of deep insight.
Lack of insight into the external world and internal orientation. No? One or two? Okay. Is it an obsession with efficiency to the degree of driving out learning? Is it lack of slack? Oh, that's more popular than I would have thought.
We have a very innovative audience.
Yeah.